So, men, I thought this would be a good episode to put out on Memorial Day. Life lessons from the Marine Corps. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening, being a part of the tribe. And a special thanks to all the patrons. Hello, and welcome to the Alpha Male Podcast. The podcast where we talk about how to be an alpha male in today's society. With so many things trying to tear down masculinity in society, let this be a place to be built up. So reach down, grab a hold, gird your loins, and saddle up for an episode of the Alpha Male Podcast. Today we're going to talk about lessons from the Marine Corps. Who I am. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I make no apologies for that. I grew up in the southeastern United States, what most would consider poor. Grew up hunting and fishing and shooting at a very early age. I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I did combat tours, plural, in Iraq. After that, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. After the Marine Corps time, I went to work for LAPD, where I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. I've also been a private contractor for the federal government. I've also served the United States Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I have been a state rifle and pistol champion in a few different states, a few different times over. I started shooting competitions even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I am very blessed to have all those talents, and I am very blessed that God got me through everything that He's gotten me through alive and in one piece and made it back safely when a lot of other good men did not. Not because of anything that I am, but because of who God has made me and because of how much God has protected me and sheltered me. I have served as the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area where our primary job is to stock active shooters. I've hunted and fished all over this beautiful country, everything from whitetail on the East Coast and mule deer on the West Coast, and elk and bear and wolf and exotics, and buffalo. I've been a professional hunter and guide, professional firearms instructor, FBI certified, NRA certified, other three-letter government agency certified, professional firearms instructor for a lot of years. And as I mentioned first, the most alpha thing about me is I am a follower of Jesus Christ, the ultimate alpha male. With that being said, we'll get into today's topic. Lessons from the Marine Corps. All right, so I have a little notebook that I keep, and in there is some ideas of episode ideas for different podcasts. If you didn't know, I do other podcasts besides this one, Gunfighter Life and Simple Man Sermons. Anyway, there's several different ideas in there. One of those ideas was lessons learned from the Marine Corps. It's been in there a while. And the other day I was going through old photos that way predate when everybody had digital phones and digital cameras were not common. You still had the disposable cameras. Actually, the cheap disposable cameras are what I took to Iraq. And these are the old style photos that you still had to go and get developed. And I was going through there to find some photos from my nephew who's asking about rifles that I had when I was in the Marine Corps. And I was digging through those photos, and that got me thinking about those days in the Marine Corps. So I was at the gym today, and in between sets of working out, I broke out the notebook, and I started writing things I learned, lessons learned from the Marine Corps. Now, I'm sure that these are other places than the Marine Corps. Number one, we'll start off with improvise, adapt, and overcome. Now, that's a catchy little saying. There's other ways you could say it. Can something else work, or can I make this work with what I have? And that's a great life skill. Sometimes there's an ideal way to do things, and sometimes that's not an option. Sometimes there are many different solutions to a problem. You may have a platoon of enemy soldiers on a battlefield. The best thing to do may be to flank them, a classic, buffalo horn attack taken from the Zulus. But perhaps you can't get around them from the front and both flanks. Maybe you have to adapt and get at them from one flank. Maybe you have to wait until they move. Maybe you have to lay down some mortar fire first to get them to move, or an air attack to get them to move. Not just a lesson for the Marine Corps. Yesterday I was trying to unhook a camper from a truck. Now that may seem completely opposite and unimportant, but the underlying lesson is the same. You see, I could not turn the handle for the jack the way that it was set up. It was situated in such a way that the back of the vehicle would not let the jack turn down. I had a little tiny handsaw to cut metal that I keep in the vehicle as part of being prepared, and I started to cut with it, and it was working. It did cut, but it would have quickly taken me a long time. I also have a pair of bolt cutters. I tried the pair of bolt cutters, but the thickness of that jack, it just was not going to cut that. So the first improv did not work. So I sat back and I thought, how else can this be done? I tried unscrewing the jack and putting it on a different way. That didn't help. It just got caught on something else. So I put it back the way that it was. I thought, how long would it take me to cut through with the little saw that I have? And I thought about how long it would take me to get a proper saw. So I went and got a proper hacksaw and cut the handle off to a point where I could turn it. And eventually, I got it off. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. Applicable for fighting enemies on the battlefield. Applicable for unhooking a trailer from a vehicle. Applicable in working out. It's a good life lesson. Use it with caution. There are plenty of times in life where I force something and improvise too much, which can also be done. I remember one time I bought a very nice gun, an HK-US P45 Expert, and I wanted to change something on it, and I screwed it into a vise instead of taking it to a proper gunsmith. And when I unscrewed out of the vise, it had teeth marks entirely down the slide. A costly lesson. Sometimes improvising is not the right answer. Sometimes waiting is the right answer, but it's a good skill to have. Here's another lesson I learned from the Marine Corps. You can't choose your boss. You can't choose your commander. I've had some very, very good bosses, and let's just say that's not always the case. You see, in the Marine Corps, the way the military is structured, basically based on a time when you had aristocrats and people they thought were better of royal blood, you have officers and enlisted men, and you could have an enlisted guy who's been in for 15 years, has fought a bunch of battles, super wise in the ways of war, and you could have a lieutenant that just got out of college who has never been shot at, and then suddenly he's your boss. Doesn't matter whether you like your boss or not. You do the best you can. You do the best job you can, regardless of who your boss is. And I'll tell you one thing, when you have a poor boss, it makes you really appreciate a good boss. Along those same lines, you can't choose your team. You see, the real life is not like high school. If you're listening to this, I know I have a lot of younger listeners, and that's great. But in high school, generally, you get to pick who you hang out with, and you tend to hang out with people that are like you, which is fine. But in the Marine Corps, in the military, and when you get older and go to other jobs, that's not the case, generally speaking. You get exposed to people from different cultures, from different backgrounds, from different socio-economical and political climates that you may not have been exposed to before. And you have to work with them. And you have to trust your lives to each other. No matter what different views you might have, no matter what your preconceived notions may have been before, when you're in that unit, when you're in that fire team, when you're in that squad, you trust your lives to those men. You trust your lives to each other. No matter what their race, no matter what their political views, no matter any of that. And for the sake of staying alive, you become the best team that you can be. And you play and you notice their strengths and you notice the things they're good at and not good at, and you try and utilize those to be the most efficient and effective that you can be. Those may not have been the people you would have chosen for your team, but that doesn't matter when you're fighting alongside each other. And when you stay in a little bit longer and you become to be in charge, the same thing also applies. You don't get to decide whether in the Marine Corps or whether you're a boss in a corporate setting. You don't get to pick. You might get to pick hiring and stuff like that, but once they're on your team, you don't really get to pick who works for you. A lot of times those people are given to you. And you have to do the same thing. You have to identify strengths, things they shine at, and things that they need encouragement on. You don't get to pick. It is written in the Bible, submit to governing authorities, and it also is written, he who leadeth with diligence. Along those same lines, you don't get to pick your weapon in the Marine Corps. You are given what you are given. So you heard my bio and about competition shooting. Before I ever went to boot camp in the Marine Corps, I was an accomplished rifle shooter. I had won a state championship. It was on a team. We had won a first place state championship. So granted, it wasn't all me, but I was very blessed with the talents to be an accomplished rifle shooter even before the Marine Corps. And I joined the Marine Corps and I got an old, beat up, very worn, very tattered M16A2 with the ratcheting trigger with the 3-round burst, meaning that a lot of times every time you pull the trigger pull is different. It was not an ideal weapon. Didn't matter. I still went to war with it and I still fought with it. Kind of tying back into the first lesson, improvise, adapt, and overcome. You do the best you can with what you're given. The tool doesn't make the warrior. The warrior masters the tool. And later in life, for an example, when I went to work for LAPD and I was allowed to use different weapons, I would buy different weapons. Or when I was a police officer in different places and I could pick different weapons, I would pick a weapon that was better for the job if I could. And when I became the commander of a tactical team and I was involved in writing policy, I let the guys use the tools that were best for them. But either way, you do the best you can with what you have. Even within those parameters, if I have to stop an active shooter, whether it's as an armed civilian or as a hired gun or whatever the capacity is, if I have to stop an active shooter, I don't want to have to do it with a handgun. I would much rather do it first with a 12-gauge shotgun if it's in close, and then maybe the SCAR 17 that I have if not. But either way, if I had to stop an active shooter, I wouldn't want to do it with a handgun, because a handgun is a compromise. You carry a handgun because it's convenient, not because it's combatively effective. It's inherently limited. No first line army, military goes to war primarily armed with handguns. But if I have to stop an active shooter, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to give it everything that I have, knowing that God will deliver me victory, knowing that if God is for me, who can be against me, and knowing that the battle is the Lord's. Like Goliath and David, it's not the weapon, it's the warrior. Another lesson learned in the Marine Corps, and to be fair, I didn't hear this term, this little vernacular, until after I was out. It came about later, but it definitely applied for the time in the Marine Corps. And that is, embrace the suck. Embrace the suck. There are seasons in life, and certainly in my life, and probably in most of your lives, that just suck. And if there's something you can do about that, then work hard to do it. But sometimes there's just a suck that you can't do anything about. Being in Iraq, in the sweltering heat, standing on a post in the middle of nowhere, sandy, dirty, alone, with a boredom you had never known before, hour after hour, knowing that it's going to repeat day after day, and knowing there's really nothing that's going to change that in the near future. Learning how to get through those tough times early. A few key things I'll pass on to you guys to help me. When you're in a season in life that really sucks, take it day by day. Just try to make it through that one day. If you can't even do that, try and get to the next little thing that you're looking forward to. The next meal, being able to go to sleep, the end of the shift, whatever it is. Focus on that small attainable goal to get through that hard time. For it is written in the Bible, focus on what is lovely. It is also written, there may be pain in the night, but joy comes in the morning. Along those same lines, the next lesson is enjoy the little things. I found in life oftentimes it's the little things that make life sweet and enjoyable, not the big things. I remember being in Iraq, covered in filth, with the smell of death and diesel fuel, when there's so much ugliness and pain in the world, and then getting a letter back home from a girl that I used to like in high school, and that letter had traveled a big chunk of the way across the world. Yes, I am from a time before cell phones were common, before there was any kind of those electronic communications. And getting those letters and just seeing, you guys probably know that most women write better than men, and just seeing the beauty of the writing and actually smelling. Just the fact that you could smell that they had had a lotion on their hands, or just smelling something beautiful, just something small like that, and embracing it and enjoying it. The little things. I remember being able to pay some Iraqi citizen to go get me a chicken so that I could eat it. And I'm not saying it's always good to give in to your food cravings. It certainly is not. But there's nothing wrong with enjoying good food that's good for you. And after eating nothing but MREs and MREs and MREs, getting a whole chicken and just enjoying that nice crispy brown skin and an onion, just enjoying that and embracing that. One of the things that one of the men that served with me, that he and I would do, is watch the sunrise or the sunset, and making a point of that. Last name of Mueller, him and I would sit just on a concrete barrier and look out. And in a world with so much ugliness in it, just enjoying the sunset. And not that that's a little thing, but it's something we take for granted because it happens every day. So enjoy the little things, a good cup of coffee, the smile of somebody. Another thing I learned early in the Marine Corps that helped me through a lot of other times in life. As you heard in the bio, been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life. And that lesson is don't fear death. Now you should want to live and have a will to live and a desire to live, but you should not fear death. I remember during the invasion of Iraq, sitting near a tree and eating, and bullets landing around me. And I looked around and I couldn't see where they were coming from. If I'd have shot back, it'd have been more likely I would have hit one of our own forces or a civilian than actually hitting, because I had no idea. There were so many high buildings around in Baghdad, not knowing where that was coming from. So what did I do? I went to the side of the tree and continued to eat my meal. Similar thing happens with getting mortared. Your incoming mortar rounds, you go to one of the safest places you can be, and whether the mortar rounds are coming down or not, you try and get some sleep, you try and get some rest when it's your time to rest, because there's nothing you can do about it. So don't fear death. If there's something you can do about it, do it. But after that, don't fear it. A lesson I learned early in the Marine Corps. For it is written, Psalms 91, I shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor the destruction that lays waste at noonday. 1,000 may fall at my side, 10,000 at my right hand, but it shall not come near me. You see, if you have to charge against an enemy, even if he's more numerous than you, being afraid, giving into that fear is not going to make you more likely to survive. It's going to make it less likely that you're going to survive. If you're always afraid of death, it makes it harder to enjoy life. As a Christian, you're called to fear one thing, and that's God. So don't waste time fearing anything else. Another lesson from the Marine Corps. Marines are not known for backing down. If you're fighting an enemy, even if you're outnumbered, even if you're outgunned, backing down is more likely to get you killed than standing your ground. So I learned a lesson of standing your ground, even when it's hard, even when it seems overwhelming. Now, there's a lot of good things about the Marine Corps, and there's some less good things, some negative things about the Marine Corps. I learned in the Marine Corps not to always go along with the culture. Just because everybody else is doing it does not mean that you should be doing it. The vast majority of the Marines that I was with when I was in the Marine Corps drank to the point of getting ridiculously drunk and smoked. Doesn't make it okay for you to do it just because everybody else is doing it. I learned that it's hard to go against the culture. I learned that Many times you will get ridiculed for doing the right thing. It's easy to do the right thing when people praise you for it. It's hard to do the right thing when you're despised for it. But the right thing is the right thing, whether it's popular or not. I learned that the hard way in the Marine Corps. I learned that being a leader meant sacrificing and sometimes suffering for those around you. After patrol, when you're tired, you check on your men and make sure they're good, make sure their equipment is good. When all you want to do is go to sleep and you give them time off, you work a little bit longer and a little bit harder to make sure your men are okay and they're taken care of. We see this conveyed by Jesus and illustrated by Jesus. You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. So I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. Also the words of Jesus in Matthew 20. It shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And I was willing in the Marine Corps, and I've been willing in many of my jobs and my professions to give my very life for those under me, for those around me, for those who may not even like me. You see, Christ didn't just die for those that loved him and were his friend. He died for those that reviled him and spit on him and beat him and abused him. You should never want to suffer for the sake of suffering, but sometimes being a good leader means sacrificing for others. Another thing I learned from the Marine Corps is to be able to do more with less. It's far more about putting out an effort and thinking your way through something than the supplies and the goods. In this American culture, you may not be listening from America, but especially in this Western American culture, everybody wants a quick fix with the next gadget, with the next thing, with the next piece of kit, the next gear. The Marines are kind of known, whether rightly or wrongly, for having the most beat up, most crappy gear out of all the American armed forces. And you see that illustrated if you're like on a Marine Corps base and you go to an Air Force base. It's kind of an inside joke of how much better their accommodations and how much better their gear is. But the Marines are known for getting hard stuff done. And that translates to a lot of other things in life. You see, for the last several months, I haven't been near a gym. In fact, only the last couple of days have I gone back to a gym. And except for a brief period where I visited someone, I worked out almost exclusively in a camper with nowhere near the amount of equipment of a gym. Is it as good as a gym with all the different equipment? No. But it's far more important that you put out and work out hard and think critically. May I have a proper bench press? No, but what else can I do? Can I have my wife do a plank and bench press my wife? Can I have my wife sit on my back while I do push-ups? The putting out is far more important. May I have easy access to a nutrition store? No. But as a professional guide, I quickly realized that a lot of people don't eat liver from an elk or from a deer, or they don't eat the heart. But I sure will. That's good nutrition. And though I spent months working out in just a camper with bare minimum equipment, I didn't get any weaker, still had a six-pack, still had the hourglass figure, still using the talents that God's given me. I give God all the credit for that, for the talents, and including self-discipline and drive and determination. All that is a gift from God. But doing more with less is a valuable life lesson. As I said earlier, there are a lot of really good things about the Marine Corps and the Marine Corps culture, but it's not all good. It was pretty self-evident that some things were just wrong. I learned that oftentimes it's easier to do the wrong thing if it fits in with everything else than to stand up and do the right thing. You may have heard the term hazing. And I'm not talking about jovial ragging on somebody the way that men often do. I'm talking about like real physical or psychological or sexual abuse. Even if it's common in the culture, it's not okay. Even if everybody else turns a blind eye to it, and you know you're going to get pushback for standing up against it. I learned that it's better for taking heat for standing up and doing the right thing even when it's not popular. Sometimes you're at the bottom and there's not much you can do, but sometimes when you come in charge, you say, I don't care if anybody else is doing this or if it's the prevalent thing. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stand up and not do it. That's what beta males do. They just go along with everybody else does. But this is the Alpha Male Podcast. You stand up for what's right. You do the right thing. Whether or not it's easy is inconsequential. You protect those weaker than you. I'm not talking about joking around with buddies, but it's not okay to pick on somebody who has a problem that can't be fixed. As we talked about earlier, a good leader encourages those and strengthens them in their weakness and encourages where they excel and uses their strengths. You learn that sadly, a lot of people, a lot of men, will do the bare minimum or do what they can get away with. But that's not being an alpha male. As an alpha male, you're called to stand up and be strong, whether it's popular or not, whether it's easy or not. As it is written, seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. You're called to do that. You're called by God. Do not be afraid or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. You are called in Deuteronomy 20. When you go out to battle against your enemies and see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God is with you. You're called to be an alpha male, strong and courageous. Not when it's easy, all the time. So stand up. Be the strong, dominant man God created you to be. If God is with you, who can be against you? If God, the maker of heaven and earth, is on your side, of what should you be afraid? All right, guys, with that, we'll wrap up this episode of the Alpha Male Podcast. If you like this podcast, you may also like Simple Man Sermons. It is preaching. You may also like Gunfighter Life if you're into guns, as you may have assumed from my bio that I am. Gunfighter Life talks about all different aspects of guns. If you want to support, you can go to Patreon, Good Shepherd Training on Patreon. Good Shepherd is the umbrella that has all those podcasts listed. GoodShepherdTraining.com. Good Shepherd Training on Instagram. Good Shepherd Training on Facebook. If you want to find out more, if you like this message and you want to support it for free, you can like, subscribe, and comment. And if you want to support in other ways, you can go to Patreon if you think this was worth supporting. If you want this message to get out there and reach more people, if you have it in your heart to give, give. And if you do not feel guilty. My God supplies all my needs. Thanks, guys, and have a blessed day.